What happens when one of America's most fearless television hosts decides she's had enough of royal excuses and confronts a prince live on national television? What you're about to witness is the most explosive celebrity interview meltdown in Good Morning America history, where Lara Spencer systematically dismantles Prince Harry's carefully crafted public image piece by piece. This isn't just another softball celebrity chat. This is a masterclass in journalistic takedown that left viewers across the nation speechless. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because this story gets more intense with every passing minute. The tension in the Good Morning America studio was palpable as Prince Harry settled into the guest chair across from Lara Spencer. The usual warmth that characterized morning television was noticeably absent, replaced by an electric atmosphere that suggested this interview would be anything but routine. Spencer, known for her direct approach and unwillingness to accept evasive answers, had clearly come prepared for battle. "Prince Harry, thank you for joining us this morning," Spencer began, her tone professional but notably cooler than her typical guest introductions. "I want to start with something that I think our viewers deserve clarity on. You've spent years talking about privacy, about wanting to live a normal life away from the spotlight. Yet, here you are again, promoting another project, another tell-all opportunity. How do you reconcile that contradiction?" Harry shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the question clearly catching him off guard. "Well, Lara, I think there's a difference between sharing our truth and being hounded by the media. We've always been selective about when and how we engage." Spencer's expression remained unchanged, but there was something in her eyes that suggested she wasn't buying it. "Selective? You've given interviews to Oprah, Netflix, documentaries, written a best-selling memoir, appeared on countless podcasts. That doesn't sound selective. That sounds like a media tour that's been going on for years." "I think you're mischaracterizing our approach," Harry replied, his voice taking on a defensive edge. "Everything we've done has been about correcting the record, about setting the narrative straight after years of lies and manipulation by the British press." "But Harry," Spencer interrupted, leaning forward slightly, "and I'm going to call you Harry because that's how you've asked to be addressed. Isn't that exactly what every celebrity says when they want to control their image? You talk about lies and manipulation, but you've also admitted to using drugs. You've made serious accusations against your family without providing concrete evidence. And you've done all of this while profiting millions from these revelations. How is that different from what you accuse others of doing?" The prince's composure began to crack. "That's completely unfair, Lara. You're comparing my lived experiences, my truth, to tabloid gossip and invasion of privacy. I've been transparent about my struggles, about my mistakes, because I want to help others who might be going through similar challenges." Spencer nodded slowly, but her expression suggested she was far from convinced. "To help others, that's admirable. But let's talk about transparency for a moment. You've been very selective about which truths you share, haven't you? You'll talk about your drug use, your mental health struggles, your feelings about your family. But when it comes to specific details, concrete evidence, or allowing others to respond to your claims, you're remarkably quiet." "I don't know what you mean by that," Harry said, though his body language suggested otherwise. "Well, let me give you an example," Spencer continued, pulling out a notepad. "In your book, you describe a physical altercation with your brother William. You paint yourself as the victim, describe your injuries, talk about how traumatized you were. But you've never provided any evidence of this incident. No medical records, no witnesses, nothing that would corroborate your version of events. Isn't that convenient?" Harry's face flushed red. "Are you suggesting I'm lying about being assaulted by my own brother?" "I'm suggesting that when you make serious accusations against people who can't freely respond due to protocol and tradition, you have a responsibility to provide more than just your word," Spencer replied coolly, "especially when you're profiting from these accusations." The tension in the studio was now unmistakable. Camera operators shifted nervously, and you could sense the production team wondering if they needed to intervene. But Spencer pressed on, unfazed by the prince's growing agitation. "Let's talk about your wife, Meghan," Spencer continued. "You've both spoken extensively about the racism you faced from the royal family and the British press. These are serious allegations that deserve to be taken seriously. But when pressed for specifics, when asked to name names or provide concrete examples, you become vague. Why is that?" We've been very clear about what we experienced. Harry shot back. The fact that you're questioning the reality of racism says more about you than it does about us. Spencer's eyes flashed with something that looked like genuine anger for the first time. Don't you dare suggest that I'm dismissing racism. Harry, what I'm questioning is your credibility when you make sweeping accusations without specifics. You've said there were concerns about your son's skin color, but you won't say who expressed these concerns. You talk about racist coverage in the press, but when examples are examined, many turn out to be standard celebrity reporting that had nothing to do with race. You clearly don't understand the subtleties of institutional racism, Harry replied, his voice rising. Just because something isn't overtly racist doesn't mean it isn't rooted in racist attitudes. And just because you interpret something as racist doesn't make it so, Spencer fired back. You've lived a life of extraordinary privilege, Harry. You were born into wealth, given the best education money can buy, had a military career handed to you, and when you decided you didn't like the responsibilities that came with your position, you were able to walk away and immediately sign multi-million-dollar deals. That's not the experience of someone facing systemic oppression. The prince looked genuinely stunned by the directness of Spencer's attack. I can't believe you're trivializing everything we've been through. The threats against my family, the invasion of our privacy, the lies that were printed about us daily. I'm not trivializing anything, Spencer responded firmly. I'm asking. You two take responsibility for your choices and your actions, instead of constantly positioning yourself as a victim. You chose to leave the royal family. You chose to move to California. You chose to sign these media deals, and you chose to make these public accusations. But with every choice comes consequences, and you seem unwilling to accept any responsibility for the consequences of your decisions. Harry stared at Spencer for a long moment, clearly struggling to find his footing in this increasingly hostile interview. You're being incredibly unfair, Lara. You're taking everything out of context and twisting it to fit your narrative. My narrative? Spencer laughed, but there was no humor in it. Harry, I'm using your own words, from your own book, from your own interviews. If that creates an unflattering picture, maybe the problem isn't with my interpretation. You're cherry-picking quotes and ignoring the broader context of what we've been through, Harry insisted, his voice taking on a pleading quality that only seemed to embolden Spencer further. Then let's talk about context, Spencer said, flipping through her notes. Let's talk about your grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, a woman who dedicated her entire life to public service, who maintained dignity and grace through decades of personal and public challenges. In your book, you describe her final years as being manipulated by advisors, suggest she was too frail to make her own decisions, and imply that your family kept you from seeing her before she died. This is a woman who loved you, who tried to find compromises to keep you in the family. How do you justify publicly humiliating her memory for profit? The question hit Harry like a physical blow. His face went pale, and for a moment he seemed unable to speak. I never said she was being manipulated. I have nothing but love and respect for my grandmother. Really? Spencer pulled out what appeared to be a page from his book. Because here you write, and I quote, that she seemed confused about family matters, and that important decisions were being made for her by people who didn't have her best interests at heart. You describe her as frail, and possibly not fully aware of the implications of the family's actions regarding you and Meghan. If that's not suggesting manipulation, what would you call it? Harry's hands were visibly shaking now. You're taking that completely out of context. I was trying to explain how the institution works, how the people around the monarchy make decisions. The institution, Spencer repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. That's your favorite phrase, isn't it? The institution did this. The institution decided that it's very convenient, this faceless institution that you can blame for everything. But the institution isn't some abstract entity, Harry. It's your father, your brother, your grandmother when she was alive. These are real people with real feelings. And you've spent years publicly attacking them while hiding behind this idea of fighting the institution. I've never attacked my family personally, Harry protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Spencer's eyebrows shot up. Never attacked them personally. You've suggested your father is a bad parent. You've accused your brother of physical violence. You've implied your stepmother is manipulative and power-hungry. And you've questioned your grandmother's mental capacity in her final years. What exactly would constitute a personal attack in your mind? Everything I've shared has been my truth, my experience, Harry said, falling back on his familiar refrain. Your truth, Spencer echoed mockingly. Let me ask you something, Harry. Do you think your truth is more valid than William's truth? More valid than your father's truth? Because they can't share their truth, can they? They're bound by duty and protocol. The same duty and protocol you abandoned when it became inconvenient. Harry's composure was completely gone now. They could speak if they wanted to. They choose not to, because it serves their purposes to let me be painted as the villain. Or maybe, Spencer said, leaning back in her chair with a satisfied expression, they choose not to because they understand that family matters should remain private, that dignity sometimes requires silence, and that public service means putting the institution above personal grievances. You know, all the things you were raised to understand, but chose to ignore. You don't know what you're talking about, Harry snapped. You don't know what it's like to grow up in that environment, to have every aspect of your life scrutinized. To lose your mother and then watch the same forces that killed her come after your wife. Spencer's expression hardened. Don't you dare invoke your mother's death to justify your behavior, Harry. That's beneath even you. Your mother died in a tragic accident, and using her memory to shield yourself from criticism is disgusting. She didn't die in an accident, Harry said quietly, his voice filled with pain and anger. She was killed by the same media machine that you're part of, the same system that hounded her to death and is now trying to destroy my family. No, Harry, Spencer said firmly. Your mother died because her driver was drunk and driving at excessive speed while being chased by paparazzi. It was a tragedy, but it wasn't a conspiracy, and it certainly wasn't orchestrated by the British royal family or the media establishment. But you've built an entire narrative around the idea that you're fighting the same forces that killed your mother, haven't you? It makes you feel heroic, makes your decisions seem noble instead of selfish. Harry stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I don't have to sit here and listen to this. Actually, you do, Spencer said calmly, not moving from her seat. You signed a contract to be here, you're being paid to be here, and you're here to promote your latest project. So sit down and finish what you started. For a moment, it seemed like Harry might actually walk off the set. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every second of his internal struggle. Finally, he sat back down, but his body language screamed of barely contained rage. Let's talk. About your military service, Spencer continued, as if nothing had happened. You've often cited your time in Afghanistan as formative, as something that gave you purpose and grounded you. But you've also written about killing enemy fighters, about treating it like a video game. Don't you think that's a problematic way to discuss taking human lives? I was trying to be honest about the psychological mechanisms soldiers use to cope with combat, Harry said, his voice hoarse with emotion. Or you were trying to sound tough, trying to craft an image of yourself as a warrior prince, Spencer suggested. Because let's be honest about your military service, Harry. You were never in the same danger as regular soldiers. You had special protection. You were pulled out whenever the risk became too great, and your entire service was as much about public relations as it was about genuine military contribution. That's not true, Harry protested weakly. Isn't it? Spencer pressed. You were withdrawn from your first deployment when your location was leaked. Your second deployment was carefully managed to minimize risk. You had security details that other soldiers didn't have, and when you left the military, you immediately parlayed that service into a platform for personal projects. You've monetized your military service just like you've monetized everything else about your life. Harry looked like he was about to cry. Why are you doing this? What's the point of tearing me down like this? Spencer's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. Because someone needs to hold you accountable. Harry, you've spent years presenting yourself as a victim, as a truth teller, as someone fighting for justice. But what you've really done is exploit your privilege, monetize your family relationships, and hide behind noble causes to justify your selfish choices. And the media has largely given you a pass. Because you're charming, and because criticizing you means being accused of defending an outdated institution. But I am fighting for justice, Harry said desperately, his voice cracking with emotion. Everything I've done has been about making positive change, about using my platform for good. Spencer shook her head slowly, and there was something almost pitying in her expression now. "Harry, let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about your answer. Can you name one concrete positive change that has resulted from all of your revelations, all of your truth-telling, all of your crusades? One measurable improvement in anyone's life that can be directly attributed to your actions?" Harry opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, clearly struggling to find an answer. "I've raised awareness about mental health, about the dangers of media intrusion, about racism in institutions." "Raised awareness," Spencer repeated flatly. "That's what every celebrity says when they can't point to actual results. You've raised awareness by talking about yourself, by sharing your own struggles, by making everything about your personal experience. That's not activism, Harry. That's therapy performed in public for profit." "That's not fair," Harry protested, but his voice was barely above a whisper now. "Let me tell you what's not fair," Spencer said, her voice rising with genuine passion. "What's not fair is using your privileged platform to attack people who can't defend themselves. What's not fair is wrapping your personal grievances in the language of social justice. What's not fair is claiming to fight racism while living in one of the most exclusive, predominantly white enclaves in California. What's not fair is talking about mental health awareness while publicly humiliating your elderly father and your brother for money." Harry was visibly trembling now, his hands gripping the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles were white. "You don't understand the pressure we were under, the impossible situation we were put in, the impossible situation of being born into wealth and privilege," Spencer shot back, "the impossible situation of having a guaranteed income worldwide, recognition, and the ability to champion any cause you wanted from within the royal family. You had everything, Harry. You had a loving family despite their flaws. You had a role that could have allowed you to make real change. You had the respect and affection of millions of people, and you threw it all away because you couldn't handle being the spare instead of the heir." "That's not what this is about," Harry said, but his denial sounded hollow even to himself. Spencer leaned forward, her eyes boring into his. "Isn't it, though? You've watched William get the attention, the preparation, the respect that comes with being the future king, and you've never been able to accept your supporting role. So when you met Meghan, you saw an opportunity to become the star of your own story, to upstage your brother, to prove that you could be more popular, more relevant, more important than the heir." "That's completely wrong," Harry said, but tears were now streaming down his face. "Is it?" Spencer pressed relentlessly. "Because from where I'm sitting, every decision you've made since your marriage has been designed to overshadow William and Kate. The timing of your announcements, your interview, releases, your book publication, even this appearance today, it's all calculated to steal attention from them. You've turned your family relationships into a competition that only you are playing." Harry was openly sobbing now, his carefully constructed public image crumbling in real time on national television. "You're wrong about everything. You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through." "I know enough," Spencer said coldly. "I know that you've spent years claiming to want privacy while courting publicity. I know that you've talked about protecting your family while exposing them to unprecedented scrutiny. I know that you've claimed to fight against privilege while leveraging your royal status for personal gain. And I know that despite all your talk about growth and therapy and healing, you're still the same petulant, entitled man-child you were when you wore a Nazi costume to a party." The reference to one of Harry's most embarrassing past incidents seemed to break something in him. Completely, he doubled over in his chair, his shoulders shaking with sobs. "Please stop," he whispered. "Just please stop." But Spencer wasn't finished. "You want to know what the real tragedy is here, Harry? It's not that the media was unfair to you, or that your family didn't understand you, or that the institution was too rigid. The real tragedy is that you had the opportunity to do something meaningful with your life, to honor your mother's memory through genuine service, to be a bridge between the monarchy and the modern world. Instead, you chose to burn it all down for money and attention, and you've convinced yourself that makes you a hero." Harry looked up at her through his tears, his face a mask of pain and humiliation. "Why are you doing this to me?" Spencer's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. "Because someone had to, Harry. Someone had to call you out on your hypocrisy, your self-pity, your exploitation of family trauma for profit. You've been surrounded by enablers and sycophants for so long that you've lost touch with reality. You've started believing your own press releases. I just wanted to live my own life, Harry said quietly, his voice broken. No, Spencer said definitively. You wanted to have your cake and eat it too. You wanted to keep all the benefits of being a royal while abandoning all the responsibilities. You wanted to cash in on your family connections while claiming to be independent. You wanted to be seen as a victim while living like a king. And when that didn't work out exactly as you planned, you decided to burn down everyone who wouldn't give you what you wanted. The studio was completely silent, except for the sound of Harry's quiet weeping. The cameras continued to roll, capturing every moment of his complete breakdown. Spencer sat back in her chair, looking almost satisfied with the destruction she had wrought. I think we're done here, she said finally, her voice returning to its professional tone. Harry, thank you for your time, and good luck with whatever comes next. Harry didn't respond. He couldn't respond. He sat in his chair, a broken man, the carefully constructed narrative of his life, lying in ruins around him. The prince, who had spent years positioning himself as a truth-teller, a victim of circumstance, a fighter for justice, had been revealed as nothing more than a privileged man, who couldn't accept that the world didn't revolve around him. As the cameras finally stopped rolling, Spencer stood up and straightened her jacket, looking down at the sobbing prince with something that might have been pity. She had accomplished what the British press, the royal family, and even his own conscience had failed to do. She had held Prince Harry accountable for his choices, his words, and his actions. And in doing so, she had delivered one of the most devastating takedowns in television history. The interview would be talked about for years to come. Not as another platform for Harry's grievances, but as the moment when his carefully crafted victim narrative finally collapsed under the weight of its own contradictions. Lara Spencer had done what many thought impossible. She had rendered the prince speechless, not through cruelty or unfairness, but through the simple act of refusing to accept his version of reality. So what did you think of this incredible confrontation? Have you ever seen a celebrity interview go this wrong? Make sure to subscribe for more explosive celebrity stories. And comment below with your thoughts on whether Lara Spencer went too far or if Prince Harry finally got what he deserved.